Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today is our first session in our Florida-Friendly Landscaping Design Workshop series. So we're going to end up doing is 3 Wednesdays in a row, and I'll be recording all of these so you can always come back and watch them, and I'll post them online so you can easily find them on our YouTube channel, which I'll send to you all. But our goal of this workshop series is to give you an opportunity to kind of learn about the basics of landscape design, but also take the opportunity to learn or to give you the opportunity to think about how you can design your property around your home using some good techniques, but also thinking about how it can become a Florida-friendly landscape. So our goal of the program isn't necessarily to dive really too far into the details of what, like, how do you design a successful pollinator garden versus an edible landscape, because the sky's the limit with how you can design. But what we can do is we can kind of create that framework to help give you the confidence in making appropriate plant selections or thinking about how you can create that landscape that you desire. So, this is a small group, and we're going to end up interacting a lot with one another over the next couple weeks. So I would love for everybody to just introduce yourself, as well as to also say like your interest in design or designing for a Florida-friendly landscape. And I'll kind of go in the order in which I have boxes on my screen, and so that puts Greg up front at first. Oh, yeah, and you have to unmute yourselves. Sorry, I have default for mute. You're still muted, Greg.
There we go.
There we go.
There we go. Hi, I'm Greg McGann. I'm actually a Florida Master Gardener, and I'm pretty well familiar with Florida-friendly landscape yards, and I have one myself, but we've had some significant changes in our yard recently. We had 2 large laurel oaks removed, and we had a ground cover in our front yard that got infected with skunk weeds, so we had to rip all of that out and start all over again. So that's why I'm particularly interested in the class.
Wonderful. Thank you, Greg. And what I'm going to do is everyone just go ahead and default mute yourself unless you are speaking, just so we don't get any background noise. That's kind of like a general best management practice on here. So, okay, yeah, one person's putting a toddler down for a nap. I know how that goes. So, but anyway, so I have next in my box is Jan.
Hi, so I have always generally been interested in gardening and never had much time. Last year, I retired. I actually, I was on a lot of your Master Gardener meetings last year, but then COVID happened and a lot of things at work, and I didn't retire when I intended to. So anyway, now I'm getting back into it.
All right.
And this is perfect. This is perfect timing because, as I said, I am almost completely retired, and I am going to be redoing my entire front yard and mostly backyard with 2 different intents. And I had been doing the research on the side about, Florida native and Florida friendly items. So this course came up perfectly. So it's not only interesting to me, it is also going to be very useful, and that's why I'm here. So in all of my other living time in Florida was on the coast: St. Johns County, Brevard County, Orlando, which of course is old seabed. So this is the first time I've ever lived anywhere in Florida that had real dirt, so that makes it exciting as well. So
that's relative.
I grew up in North Alabama. Yes. It's not real dirt compared to that, but it's real dirt compared to anywhere south.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jan. Well, thanks for joining us. Next, I have Jenny Hess, or is it Guinea? Someone said they pronounced it Guinea recently, so that was new to me.
No, I'm not a guinea. I'm a Jenny. Hi, I'm in Okaloosa County. I'm living on a bayou in Shalimar, Florida, near Fort Walton Beach. and I am a master gardener too, and love it, although I'm not loving it with all our restrictions with COVID. I can't wait till we can all get together and hug each other again, because we are a close group. Because we live on the water, we're really prone to damage when we get hurricanes. And when Hurricane Sally came through last fall, man, it came up in the yard, took everything out, all the plantings, and then I just let it go because winter was coming and what was left froze or just got angry and said, I ain't growing anymore, not here. So I've got this blank slate out there on half my yard that I'm dying to put something in, and hopefully if it goes, I won't cry too many tears this time.
And that's
Okay.
one thing. And that's one thing that's really unique about, planning for a landscape, with Florida Friendly Landscape, is we think about landscape resilience, and how do we think about making a resilient landscape? So in Florida, when we're impacted by major storms like hurricanes, how do we make sure that we're managing a landscape? And it can start with design, so that if something like that occurs, it recovers very quickly, and you don't have to start over to a certain extent. So great, Jenny. Well, thank you for joining us. I have Anna next, but I think she stood up. So let's go ahead and we'll jump to Jean Bryant. Oh, there's Anna. You'll go next, Anna. We'll have Jean go.
Good afternoon. I just signed on here and I apologize for my lateness. I've only been trying to get on since 1:45 p.m. So my tardiness is due to my inability to connect with Zoom.
Oh, no worries.
I'm looking forward to working with the landscapers, and recently certified as one of the Master Gardener landscape professionals. And I like to I recently had a house that I went to and assisted with landscaping. In between the two of us, the thing turned out good.
Good.
Got a lot of native in there now. Good.
And thank you, Jean, for joining us.
That's my story and sticking to it.
Thank you, Jean, for joining us. Your connection's a little weird, is a little poor, so we get it intermittently. But thank you for joining us. And you mentioned that you signed up to do the the Florida Friendly Landscaping Professional certification. That's a neat new certification. I know some people are starting to go through. Anna, would you like to go next? Anna, would you like to go next? You're still muted. There you go.
Sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine.
I'm here. I'm not always so good with Zoom. I'm a homeowner in Alachua County in Gainesville, and I'm looking to see if I can get some help as to what kind of plants to put in a shade area under a live oak tree. Someone had given me ferns, and unfortunately they're the very invasive ferns, so I've been pulling them out. So, but they're never leaving. So I'm hoping that there's something else I can put there. I also have a sunny area by my garage that we took some bushes out of, that I was hoping people could recommend something to put in there. I put some things, but it doesn't seem to be working.
Absolutely. Yeah, you'll learn a lot of strategy about plant selection and how to choose plants based off of your needs or your outcomes. So, and planting in shade can be kind of difficult sometimes, but there is a wonderful plant palette and plant selection that we can pick from to make you successful. And Boston fern, did you go to your friend and you gave me an invasive plant?
I wanted to make her come over and help me pull it all out, but it's got so many of those little bulbs,
those little tubers.
So I don't know how to get rid of it. It's just like I keep cutting it back and pulling it out, and it doesn't seem to disappear.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Take some time, but we'll work with it. Yep.
Definitely.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next we have is Jacqueline. It seems that you put your toddler down for his nap or her nap.
She decided not to.
Normal.
So we'll see how this goes. Okay. So I own a home kind of out in the country. I feel like everyone knows a lot about plants here, except maybe me. I have 2 giant sycamore trees in my yard, so it's kind of a challenge to find what to put under them. In the summer, it's full shade, and in the winter, it's full sun. I have a lot of native plants in my yard because it's kind of an untouched country house. So I'm always in a battle between, are these weeds and I should pull these up, or this looks really unique, should I dig it up and plant it somewhere and give it some TLC? So I'm kind of more interested in native Florida plants so that I can kind of care for what I have in my yard already and save what I have and add to it. I got wet, soggy ground and super sandy soil in other areas, so it's just a mix. So I'm looking for ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the nice thing is when it comes to plant selection, you won't really need to select plants as part of your landscape design until you get kind of close to the end. You can think about plants that you want, but really that comes to that final part of the design where we really start to select plants. And luckily we have a bunch of resources that I'm going to share with you all that help with plant selection with the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. So you can just put in those environmental conditions that you need to plant for, and it'll pull up a bunch of plants that grow well in those conditions. And if you like how they look, that works great. So it'll be a great resource. So thank you, Jacqueline, for joining us. Next is Lance.
Hello, just recently moved back into the area from Arizona and bought a house. I think the yard has been rather unattended for a very long time. I have a little bit of experience with Florida Friendly Landscaping, but it's been a long time. So I'm just here to learn as much as I can, and especially how to get rid of certain vine species that I can't stand, that I can't seem to get rid of. So yeah, I think my greatest challenge is actually going to be my HOA, but other than that, I'm ready to go.
We can make it work. Which HOA are you in, Lance?
Hale Plantation.
We can make it work. Are you in West or Hale Plantation Association?
I think I'm in Hale Plantation Association, I think. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay, we'll make it work. So, all right, Judy.
Hi, yes. Hello, I'm Judy. I worked for about 20 years in and around New York doing horticultural design, and living down here, it's a very different palette. I'm really interested in learning more about the appropriate plants to use for design, and working with the principles of Florida Friendly Landscaping makes all kinds of sense for our water needs too. I'd like to become more familiar with the plants that we can use to make strong design, and especially native plants. Thanks.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Judy. Yeah, I knew you'd like this class with your design background. So yeah. Next we have the last person I think I got everybody, is Mary.
I have a yard that's had lots of plants taken out of the front yard and the backyard. And I live next to the people who have never seen an invasive plant that they didn't enjoy. So I've got to figure out how to get some of this stuff out of here that's crazy and put in some new plants that will be friendly to Florida.
Wonderful, wonderful. Invasive species are a common thing that we have to battle. And, all throughout the state, that's a common thing. A lot of the plants that are invasive species were brought here because they have high ornamental value, but then they just take over. And I am not afraid to admit that coral ardesia is an absolutely beautiful plant, but it is a monster and should be destroyed.
My neighbors both have them.
Oh no.
Yeah,
So
both sides. I
yeah,
spray, I just spray along the fence all the time.
just try to keep them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're unbelievably aggressive. So, well, wonderful. So we can definitely see that all of us have different backgrounds or ideas of what we would like to accomplish with the program. And one of the things that I really like about just design in general is design, I like to say it's the combination of art and science, and you're just trying to solve a problem. And our goal is to allow you all to think about your landscapes and how can you think about designing them. And I want to really work with you all on how to draw a design and plan your own design as we go through this program. Does everybody have a copy of like their property boundaries or have the ability to easily kind of like draw one up? Because you don't have to make it to scale. You can use it for planning. Does everyone have a copy? Because I also sent out that copy of just a rough base map also. So we're not going to use it quite yet, but it just gives us opportunity because next week, next Wednesday, we'll all have the opportunity to kind of share what you've done. We call that a think, pair, and share. So we'll pair everybody up and let you all talk and share about what you're learning. And that'll set us up for success as we move along to the next parts of the program. So are there any questions before we kind of jump in? Because I want to make sure, I want to start going through the presentation for today, and then that'll allow us to still have some time to start working on that first part of the project. Wonderful. And because it's a small class, feel free to just unmute yourself if you want to ask a question, or just put your questions within the chat box. I'll have those open and so I can monitor them. So let me go ahead and share screen. All right. So you all can see that, correct?
Yes.
Wonderful. And there might be a box blocking everything. I'm trying to get it out of the way. Okay. So designing your Florida-friendly landscape. So what we're going to do over these next couple weeks is, we're going to start from the very get-go of basic idea of what designing is, and we'll work through that design process. So then at the end of the third session, you will have the ability to sit down and feel comfortable, start drawing and finishing up a design and have an understanding on how you can implement it. So as a general overview, today we're just going to talk about what the Florida-friendly landscaping program is, because that's a core component of what the program is how we're doing landscape design, but how are we doing it under the idea of Florida-friendly landscaping program. We're going to learn about like that creating landscape designs, that process that we're going to go through, and it's a generalized design process. We're going to talk about creating landscape goals, in which you all have a good grasp on already, which is really nice. And then we're going to talk about that first step of creating a design, which you all have actually begun doing. Oh, and yes, you can print all of this material if you would like. So if we were in person, I would have binders that I can hand out to everybody. So sorry. And so today we're going to get to what we call the inventory and analysis. And that's where you really start to paint a picture of what's happening within the landscape and what does it mean? And then how does it impact what you're going to design? So, so let's go ahead and get going. And in the chat box, I did put that survey link again. If you were unable to do it at the beginning, it's a pre-survey on Qualtrics. I like to compare at the beginning, at the end, how you improve or change. So, so go ahead and take a moment if you haven't done so and do that, and we'll go ahead and keep going. So the program outline for, like I mentioned, is we're going to do the introduction, kind of what we're doing today. We're going to talk about the FFL program, preparing to design a Florida-friendly landscape. Next week, we're going to do what I say is inside the designer's toolbox. So it's kind of like all the designers, whether you're a landscape architect, an engineer, and you're trying to design something, artists do this. It's kind of like those little tips and tricks and tools of the trade that they use to kind of create order and harmony within a design. And then we're going to end up having that implementing and maintaining a Florida-friendly landscape, which will be that last session. So what is the Florida Friendly Landscape? So the Florida Friendly Landscape, it is a series of 9 principles, and those 9 principles really allow us to, or is an integrated approach to maintaining an attractive and colorful and diverse yard. But it really comes back to conserving water and protecting water quality. And the FFL, or the Florida Friendly Yards, have the ability to be very friendly to wildlife because we really support diversity in plant selection, so the different types of plants that we have available, as well as they're just environmentally responsible, especially when we're thinking about how we're using water, nutrient management. That really comes down to maintenance post-design, but we can plan for it. And they can actually be significantly less work compared to a traditional Florida landscape, but it really depends on if there's any specialized types of gardening. But just general massing plants and landscapes that you would see in an HOA, kind of following that same principle as an FFL, it is less work. So the FFL program essentially becomes more of a management guidelines. So we have an understanding of, we can design any type of landscape. So it can be any aesthetic you want, but it really comes down to how are we going to manage it, and we can plan for that management. And a lot of that management planning starts with that first principle. And that first principle of the FFL program is right plant, right place. And when we're talking about plant selection and determining which plants would be best for your landscape as part of your landscape design, that's where you're going to put a lot of your energy thinking. Because if you have the ability to select plants that naturally thrive within the landscape or that environmental conditions that you're planting in, it's going to make those plants be successful or more successful. So you won't have to water them as much. You're not going to really have any pest issues. You shouldn't really have to fertilize them. And they can just minimize your overall work within the landscape just in general. So let's focus a little bit on that right plant, right place for a second. So right plant, right place is just is the connecting or matching plants to those environmental conditions. So a great example, some of you mentioned I have a full sun area, and one area I have deep shade. So there's going to be plants that thrive in full sun or deep shade. What are some other maybe environmental conditions or things that can determine which plants do well in your landscape?
Type of soil you have in that area.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like in my yard, I have one area that drains very, very well, and another area that doesn't drain too well at all. So I wouldn't put the same plants in those areas because of that concern. Yeah. So soil conditions.
Availability for irrigation.
Yeah.
And then also, for me, I mean, I don't know if you know the Rock Creek neighborhood, but my home is below the road. I'm on a climb down to the creek. So I've got, an area where, and part of that's water management in the front, because it's more inclined. It's a different water solution in the back where I've got a more level area.
Right. So yes, so drainage and where water is coming from and moving, and accessibility to irrigation. Sometimes, that plant selection is going to be really dictated based off of those water needs. So there's going to be some times if you have the ability to water things, cool, that's a really good tool to use, or irrigation is a great tool to use during periods of drought and plants aren't happy because of those drought conditions. But there's some plants that absolutely thrive in drought conditions. They do very well, or they have a high drought tolerance. So you can plant or select plants that are going to be in drought conditions regularly because they have that high tolerance to them. So what are some other conditions that you all think about?
The amount of sun or shade.
Yeah, sunshade.
Animals, whether you've got possums and armadillos and etc.
Yeah, some problematic species. And then you can also pick plants, based off of how they attract wildlife. I want more hummingbirds, or I want more birds. want some bees, butterflies. You can select specific plants based off of those needs, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Anything else? There's a couple others that I think are important that we haven't mentioned yet.
How much maintenance you're willing to do in different areas?
Yeah, maintenance is important. Thinking about the amount of maintenance that's going to be involved. Ideally, by following these principles, you're going to have very minimal maintenance. The more annuals and perennials you use within a landscape, you're going to generally have a little extra maintenance. But one other big one that hasn't been mentioned yet is climate conditions. So some plants thrive and do well in cooler climates, some do well in warmer. So we always refer to that as like the USDA hardiness zone. It's kind of a generalized classification on where plants do well. And in Alachua County, primarily, we're 9A. If you're up in like the northwest part of Alachua County around High Springs area, you're going to be 8B. But there's some really cool understanding or knowing where you are within your hardiness zone allows you to determine which plants do well in your climate. And next one, this one's a little bit harder, but it is actually very, very important. It is the size of a plant. So how tall does a plant get? How wide does a plant get once it's growing or maturing? I have a lot of different landscaping pet peeves. That's what I call them. And one of my landscaping pet peeves is putting sweet viburnum, which is a very common shrub in a landscape, in front of a window. Because that sweet viburnum actually wants to grow to be 15 to 20 feet tall, but you're constantly pruning it to maintain a hedge underneath a window. So that is regular maintenance, and having to prune plants a few times a year just to keep them and compartmentalized to a certain size is a lot of work. So if we have the ability to think, what's that mature size of that tree going to become? How do I anticipate that in my design is going to significantly reduce the overall maintenance of a plant. So when we actually select plants, like we're trying to determine how many plants we need, we determine that based off of that mature spread of a tree or a shrub or some type of annual perennial. So how wide or how much of an area does it cover? So like a kunti, which is a very, very common plant that's used as a shrub, you can space them about 3 to 4 feet. What we say is on center. So the center of the plant, you can put one center of a plant every 3 to 4 feet. That's called on center planting. But a lot of times you'll see people plant them not 1 foot, but about 2 feet from one another. And what happens and that's to help fill in the space quickly. But those kunti, our plants, do this thing called grow. So as they grow, they start to grow into one another. They're competing for resources. They're competing for water. Their roots are fighting for things. So next thing you know it, your plants are stressed because you planted them too tightly. So some are going to end up dying, or you're going to bring in pathogens and pests into that landscape. So really understanding how big a plant can get will really help you out down the road. And we'll talk more about that and like how to determine plant counts and everything later on. So right plant, right place. That's going to be the biggest part of the entire like landscape design process, is determining what are going to be the best plants for me that best fit my environmental conditions. We actually have an app from the state Florida Friendly Landscaping website, and it's actually a plant guide, a plant selection guide. I'm going to put this, and I'll email this all to you as resources, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat box. It used to be charged as a subscription, but it's now free, thankfully. But when you open up this app, this is the app that you can use where you actually select those environmental conditions, and then it will end up giving you the plants that do well in those environmental conditions. And again, we'll go back to this later and we'll start talking a little bit more about plant selection, but that's a fantastic app and resource that's free and available to you all. So the next few or the next principles about the Flora Friendly Landscaping Program all kind of help support that right plant, right place, or they can't be successful principles unless you're following right plant, right place. That first principle is like the big umbrella term. If you follow right plant, right place, everything else starts to fall in line as part of your design and management of your Florida friendly landscape. So the second principle is water efficiently. That's really the component of a landscape where it's like, how am I getting water to a landscape? How are you all, how many of you are irrigating currently? And if you are, what type of irrigation system do you have?
So I was until someone broke one of my pieces, but what I inherited, and this was something I was interested in. This house actually has one of those sensors set up. Now, it wasn't functioning even before someone ran over one of the pipes, but yeah, that's, as I said, that's if I get it repaired, hopefully that. Right now, I'm just using a hose.
Yeah, so yeah, using a hose, that's actually very effective. It's very, very effective. So yeah, so you're like a traditional pop-up rotor system. You do have those smart irrigation controllers that can determine, has it rained recently? And it can automatically turn on and off your system. We've actually found that those don't work very well at all, especially like the rain sensors. That's very, very common. There's a cork inside those rain sensors, and if you don't replace that cork on an annual basis, your rain sensor will not be effective. So I was at my parents' house a couple of years ago, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna look at their rain sensor, and I opened up the sensor, and the cork was just crumbs. There's nothing remaining, so it wasn't going to work ever. So there's new ways that we can control our irrigation more effectively with those smart controllers. So rain sensors have been used and are very common and are still used. In Alachua County, they're no longer appropriate, but we have soil moisture sensors. So they're actually things that you bury in the soil that read soil moisture content, and it'll tell your irrigation system if, yeah, there's enough moisture down here, or no, it's not. Those work way better than a rain sensor. We also have now like weather-based systems. So it's constantly monitoring the weather based off of local weather stations, and it'll determine if your irrigation system needs to go on or off based off of that. So, and that's for all irrigation systems for residential neighborhoods. But there's other ways that we can save water or use water effectively. What are some of the other methods you all are probably using within your landscapes to irrigate?
Currently not using anything and don't plan to, if possible, other than, occasionally with a water hose.
Wonderful.
Like mulch or landscaping fabric, is that the kind of thing you're talking about as well?
Well, we'll get there. There's benefits of mulch, yes. Yep, for water conservation. So yeah, I mean, we've gone in this weird spiral with development that all homes have to have irrigation, but they don't, because you can be wildly successful with just going out. We call it the hose dragging method, where you just go out and you just drag the hose around and just water the plants as needed, and you actually end up with a significantly lower water bill, and you're watering the plants appropriately. Because one of the biggest issues that we do have with those timers is you have the Ron Popeil set it and forget it method, where that actually, there's a lot of times your system will run and it can make for a weaker landscape. So we actually, if you have a timer, we recommend you turn the entire system off unless you have a period of drought, or if you don't have a system, you wait for that period of drought and you just go out and you hand water with a hose. Yeah. Other ways that we can irrigate is like micro irrigation systems, micro sprays, just ways, like those pop-up rotors. They measure water by the gallons per minute, whereas our micro spray systems or micro drip irrigation systems, we see in shrub beds, those like little tubes, those measure water by gallon per hour. So they're using significantly less water than those typical pop-up rotors. But the nice thing is, if you have plants that are well established following right plant, right place, you never have to water them unless you're in a very severe drought. So that's one way that you end up saving a lot of water in your landscape. So the third principle, that's fertilize appropriately. That's just knowing if, as you're managing a landscape, making sure that you're doing a soil test regularly and selecting appropriate nutrients based off of the needs of your landscape. So soil pH, understanding what your soil pH is and making sure that you're selecting those plants as well to grow well in that soil. So those soil conditions. So fertilize appropriately. Mulch, so that brought up, so sorry, let me go back to fertilize appropriately. So obviously excess of nutrients and not applying them appropriately can lead to pollution, water pollution. So that really comes back to a water quantity issue. And that's where FFL program helps with water quality. The fourth principle is mulch. And Jane mentioned this, mulch. So mulch is, ubiquitous across the landscape. And please make sure, everybody, you mute yourself unless you're talking. We're picking up a lot of background noise. So the mulch, by having an appropriate mulch depth about 3 inches, what that does is it helps conserve water. So you apply water or it rains, it helps keep the soil nice and cool so you're not losing water from evaporation. So it allows that water to kind of hang around a little bit longer than normal. So it allows you to use water more efficiently. It helps reduce weed pressure by suppressing the weeds that mulch stuff does. Which you can get similar benefits with weed barrier cloth, which slowly breaks down over time, but and it also helps regulate soil temperature. So it's having about a 3-inch mulch layer can be very beneficial. So whenever you have ornamental beds, making sure that you plan on mulch and what type of mulch. So natural leaf litter, that's all wonderful because it breaks down and helps put nutrients back into the plants. You can use pine byproducts like pine bark and pine straw. My favorite is pine straw. And then the others that you could use are like eucalyptus or melaleuca, if you can find them available. We don't recommend, or you cannot use cedar or cypress just because it's not sustainably harvested. Those aren't appropriate mulch types. So the pine byproducts are typically going to be our best. So we don't recommend using stone as a gravel. It does not work. It heats up the soil. It increases evaporation rates, and it ends up collecting a bunch of dirt. And next thing you know, it's not going to help with weed suppression at all. So no stones and no rubber mulches. So next is attracting wildlife, and that's just more of what plants do you have within your landscape when you're selecting plants? How can you provide food, water sources, place for habitat for wildlife, whether it be a pollinator, a bird, you name it, you can pick it. And how can you provide those resources for them within your landscape? The next one that really comes down to the management, but the managed yard pest. So we follow the Integrated Pest Management Program, or IPM for short. And that really comes down to how are you managing the landscape appropriately. Now, as part of the design and plant selection, you can really think about what are some plant material that might have a higher pest resistance to certain plants. Like a great example that no longer works, but it was a great example, is Floratam, St. Augustine. Floratam was developed because of its resistance to chinch bugs. So, but then that's all we planted because we didn't have a diversity of turf grass. So all we planted was Floratam, turf grass, St. Augustine grass around the state. And then Mother Nature decided to pull a quick one on us, and the chinch bugs all developed longer proboscis. So then that Floratam lost its resistance. So the chinch bug's like, you took away my food. All right, I'll grow a longer nose so I can eat your Floratam. So diversity is very important, but there's still varieties of plants that we can pick that help with that have higher pest resistance. Recycling plant materials, that's like composting. How do you bring that, rather than throwing that leaf litter in a bag that gets picked up and taken to the landfill or the dump or yard waste facility, how can you take like those leaves and clippings, put them back in the landscape as mulch, or mulch them up with a lawnmower, like with the grass clippings, and just let them go back in the ground, break down, and they recycle nutrients. So your plants aren't going to necessarily suffer from a nutrient deficiency by those plants breaking down and just providing those nutrients back immediately into your landscape. The eighth principle is reducing stormwater runoff. We're not going to go too much into this one because there's a bunch of different strategies. Now, if one of you has a lot of issues with stormwater on your property, I can work with you in that part of that design, because there's different ways that we can capture, convey, store, and infiltrate stormwater in our landscape rather than allowing stormwater to go into the roadways. So how can we reduce stormwater runoff by using it within our landscape? And then next is protecting the waterfront. And that really comes down to what are those, like if you live directly on a water body, we have like a 10-foot no maintenance buffer around that water body. So these are the 9 principles of the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. But like I mentioned, right plant, right place, that's going to be the big key one. And it really comes down to maintenance. So we want to see diversity in plant selection, so you have a more resilient landscape. But there's ways that you can choose specific plants that I think it was Jacqueline earlier mentioned that she has some large sycamore trees on her property. You know, sycamore trees are deciduous. You're going to have shade in the summer, and you're going to allow for that sunlight to come in the winter. So, you know, deciduous trees are sometimes really nice to have on the south side of a home, because it's going to put shade on your home in the summer and allows the light in on the winter. We call that passive warming and cooling, and you're allowing those trees to help cool your house or warm your house depending on the season, and it helps actually dramatically reduce your electric bill. So we can use benefit plants to our benefit a lot within the landscape. So, but it all comes back to right plant, right place, and how do we want to create the landscape that we want to create. So any questions about the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program? I know we dove through that pretty quickly, but the biggest one is that first principle, that right plant, right place. All righty, good.
I do have a question.
Yeah, Judy.
Is the program going to touch on season interest and how to create that with your plantings?
Yep. We'll talk all about that. Yep. So, so now we have a basic understanding of the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. You know, now let's think about, how do we design a Florida Friendly landscape, or how do we design any type of landscape? I always like to talk about this process and that big picture. It's a very reiterative process. So you can always keep going through this design process over and over and over and over again. When I was doing professional practice, or I was doing residential design, a lot of the things that you work on as part of this process is you're finding yourself going through this process over and over and over, and then you end up finishing because you have a deadline. And it's a matter of just like, how are you constantly refining your idea? How are you making sure that you're creating a landscape that can be successful? And usually we find ourselves within the little nitty-gritty details, which isn't always necessarily important, but can have an impact nonetheless. So it's always important to start with that 30,000-foot picture. And like, what's the big idea? You know, not like what's the big idea, but like, what's your big idea? What do you want to accomplish? So when you think about your landscape, what do you want your landscape to become? How do you imagine it being used within your landscape? What are some of your thoughts? What's your big idea? What's your big vision?
You want us to answer that?
Yes. Yeah. What's the big vision that you all have for your landscape, or what are some of the things that you would like to accomplish?
I'd like mine to have 4-season interest. I'd like a succession of bloom and color, and I would like pathways to sun around it.
So yeah, year-round interest, 4-season interest, which we can definitely do, and that's really comes down to plant selection. So when Judy mentions 4-season interest, it's really looking at plant selection to make sure you have things blooming throughout the year. And that's good landscape design is always going to have that 4-season interest. Yeah. And then also functionality, I believe you mentioned, Judy, is like how the landscape going to be used. Is that correct? Did I hear that?
Yes, I'd like it to be. I'd like it to be a strolling garden.
Strolling gardening. Perfect. Yeah.
So in my front, I would like, right now it's there is a lawn that was there. I want to have an all mulch. I love Melaleuca. Who is it? Flora, whoever who makes that, but I'd like to have that with a lot of, I definitely want some daylilies, but other than that, I want things that will be happy in that area and attractive. I would like that more for looks. In the back, I would like a couple of areas. I want to put some raised beds because I do have a lot of armadillo, deer, all of those kinds of issues. So I'd like to be able to do some gardening. I have oak, hickory, magnolia. I'm backing into a true, Florida woods as it goes down to the creek. So there's enough light that things in pots will grow. So I want to have a section of it for that. And then the rest, I really am fine with what it is. I just want to clean it up.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
All of it not to be more in tune with what's happening. That right plant, right place is really, I guess, a big thing for me making. And that's part of why this course was perfect in terms of helping finding those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned something that's very common within landscape design. It is comparing that front and backyard. And that kind of thought emerged in the early 20th century, thanks to the National Garden Club, actually, that actually promoted it. But it was really comes down to that front part of your landscape is that public. It's the look nice, that public, make it look nice and clean. It's what sells the home. The backyard, that's where you really can express your individuality. It's more private, and we treat it differently, obviously. So that's a very common perspective, is front yard is more public, backyard is more private, but you can kind of intermingle them a little bit. But yeah, perfect, Jan. Yeah. And you're thinking about right plant, right places. What plants work well in these different conditions? So any other thoughts? Who has some big ideas of what they'd like to accomplish?
I have what is not really that big, but I kind of just want my house to be more framed. I live on a country road and the house just looks like one of those desolate sandy Florida yards. So framing the house with a little bit of color around the trees, the sycamores, that type of thing. But also because it is like kind of a wild Florida yard, there are sections that are not like, you just don't use them. We have similar, I guess, to Jan's yard, that it goes a little downhill into it opens up in the back to a big cypress dome. So it's just muddy swamp. But I would love to have something that makes that area more inviting, interesting plants, instead of just like, here's wild Smilex thorn bushes. Then the front of the yard is like, I have creeping cactuses creeping in from the neighboring properties. So, you want to keep out poison ivy and cactuses on the ground. You want to be able to walk in some grass. So not just tracking sand in. So using more plants to keep the sand down, keep the water from going out, I currently have a lot of what I like, birds and butterflies and bugs and stuff like that. So encouraging those, but at the same time, just making it so I can use all the corners of my yard, because right now, if you just let it go, you just can't use all of it.
Right, right. And this brings up a good talking point. So think about how your landscape is going to be used. Who's using it? I think I want to progress in my slides. Yeah. So Jacqueline, those are all great points. And, thinking about what do you want to design for? Who are you designing for? It can be completely different. So like my backyard, my front yard looks a little bit nice, but my backyard, that's where the family hangs out, and similar to Jacqueline, I have a toddler that terrorizes everything. So my backyard is going to be kind of designed for my toddler to be able to run around and be a toddler, but how different would that be once he becomes a teenager or a high schooler? How do they want to use that backyard? How do I want to use that backyard by the time they move out? It's like I'm designing the yard for them and I don't get it until they're gone. But use and functionality changes based off of who's using it and how they're using it. So in my backyard, I have like a big turf grass area, or a turf grass area. I don't want to call it big, but that's where like all the activity is, because that's conducive for a child to play in, where Judy mentioned having a strolling garden. Strolling gardens are great, but you're not going to necessarily give that big activity area because there's going to be a lot more planting in it. So thinking of who you're going to design for can have a big impact on what you think that vision will be of what your landscape can become. So, so these are kind of like these big questions, and does anybody else have anything that they would like to share? Because I know, like, how are you going to use it? Who are you designing for? Is it just you, or is it like some of your family, grandkids? What do you anticipate the use of that yard to become? Anybody want to share? That's totally fine. So, but that 30,000 foot view, that what's the big idea, that kind of helps you start to think, what are those, like that what and who do you want to design for? Is it your family, you what are those activities? What's that purpose, that function? But why do you want to create that landscape design? Why not just leave it natural and don't worry about it, or versus why do I want to take and change it and make this flora friendly landscape? And that's where you can have instances like Jacqueline was mentioning, try to really kind of make the house, add some color to it, make it look more inviting and welcoming. And a simple plant palette can be very successful in doing so and not really require any extra work. But then you can think about, okay, so you have that big idea. What's those goals and outcomes? So what will your landscape become after you are done? So that's part of like, how will it, like, is it going to be an area for activity? Is it going to be an area that's for peace and quiet? Like, I imagine like some of the coolest designs I've ever seen are just tiny little like row house gardens. I really like those in like dense urban areas. My brother lives in Brooklyn, and he lives in one of those little row houses where you have that tiny little, maybe 25-foot wide by 75-foot long green space, like right behind the row house. And I've seen some like really, really cool designs on those very minimal footprints. And, they don't have any kids. It's just my brother and his wife, and they have started designing it where it's this very quiet, like respite, very like Zen type of garden, very lush in plant material, very dense, but they have some open places where they can entertain people. It's quiet. They have very subtle lights that are within the space. So it really kind of becomes this quiet, resting oasis in the middle of the city. And it has a huge impact on a very small footprint. So that's an example of like how you can have a very big impact with very minimal design, really. But that really comes down to their goals and outcomes, is like, what will that become after you're done? They wanted it to be this restful place, or Judy wants it to be a strolling garden where you can spend time walking through the garden and exploring contemplatively. And that comes back to those goals and outcomes, how it will be used, and what is that future function of the landscape. So when I do my designs, I think about how will that landscape function change. And I mentioned that earlier, is like I have my kids, so I'm thinking about how they're going to use the garden now. Then I think about how will we use that landscape in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Can I start planning my landscape now? So then as the kids get older, or as that function changes over time, I can easily just add to my garden to help create this different functionality to it, rather than having to start all over. So, so the goals and outcomes, it's really starting to think about what am I designing? Who am I designing for? To kind of just give you a benchmark to understand what to do to move forward with your landscape design. So usually, like when I work with clients in professional practices, where you spend like a few hours just hanging out with them, getting to know them, getting to understand their likes, their dislikes, and that really gives you a good picture of how to create this design for them. And this is actually a very fun period because it helps you generate new ideas. So it's just more of just thinking, outside the box, what do I want to create, or how can I create the landscape for the desired outcome? So once you have this big picture, it allows you, okay, so what? Now I need to actually start thinking about my landscape, and that's where the inventory and analysis begins. So the inventory and analysis, that is the real understanding of the landscape, knowing what's happening, those environmental conditions, what are some pluses and minuses, what I like to say, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities and threats of the landscape. So that inventory analysis, which I'll talk about here in a second, it gives us the true understanding. It shows us what currently exists, which is the inventory, and it tells us, and then the analysis part is, what does it mean? It's like, okay, we have this, so what? That's what the inventory analysis is. But it's a major step in all design. Everybody's doing this as part of design process. Landscape architects, landscape designers, architects, whomever, if you're designing anything, you're thinking about where you're designing for, because that really alludes to how you can create the design. And it's that foundation of that right plant, right place. And then after you have that inventory and analysis completed, that's when you actually get into the design of your landscape. So you actually have a document in that binder that I gave you that's all about the inventory and analysis. And when you're doing the inventory, it's just when you're going to start just exploring your landscape, taking note of what exists. That's all you're concerned about is, which way is your home facing? Is the front facing east? Is it facing west? Where are you having full sun? Where you have deep shade? And you can see, like on this example, it's showing existing trees. It says swales, and that's like, where is water existing? Is there water flowing on the property? Where does it flow at? Maybe some good views. What are some good views outside your landscape, and what are some bad views outside your landscape? So this is just really walking around your landscape and recording what you see, feel, and experience. Some really important things that you need to note as part of this inventory and analysis is, think about soil drainage. Are there wet spots, dry spots? Is there any water sources available? Where are they located? Think about, what are the existing plants? Are there plants that you want to keep as part of your design? Are there plants that you want to relocate? Or are there plants that you can completely remove? Think about sun shade patterns, because obviously our sun sits higher in the sky in the summer, and it sits lower in the winter. So you might have really good sun in parts of your landscape in the summer, but you might not have good sun in the winter. So really think about those sun shade patterns throughout the year, and really your experience on your property is really going to help give you that picture. That's actually a big hindrance of a lot of inventory analysis from like landscape architects or landscape designers, is we're only there at certain times of the year. We don't get a full complete picture. So that's why really talking with the clients is very important. So look for build features. Judy, do you have a question?
I just wanted to say that one of the other things I like to do is make sure I'm looking out the window of the house.
Yep.
To see what kind of views we're going to get that way.
Yeah, what are the views in and outside of the house? Well, outside the house is going to be most important, to making sure you don't block those views. So look for built features. So where are your windows, where are your doors, where are power lines? That's very important. I've seen a lot of power lines be missed in an inventory, and a tree is planted underneath the power line, and within a couple of years, that tree will be growing in the power line. That's a very bad idea. So look for those built features and take note of them. And the views, but also think about your neighborhood codes and restrictions. So Lance, I believe you said that you're in Hale Plantation. So understanding what those rules would be is important. That's correct. You said Hale, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So, and making sure that if you want to create and make these changes, if you live in an HOA, we still have our Alachua County Florida Friendly Landscaping Ordinance. We have the state statute, but still, if you're living in an HOA, you still have to go through the approval process to create those major changes or to make those changes. So always review those neighborhood codes and restrictions to see if there's anything that dictates how you need to design and plan. And you can definitely have Florida Friendly landscapes in Hale. So
can I ask a quick question? I don't know if you can answer this or not. Do you know if the HOA can supersede some of the state or county laws?
Yes and no.
Okay, perfect. Good enough.
That's it. So as part of the state statute is an HOA cannot tell you cannot do adopt a Florida friendly principle or Florida friendly practice. But if that substitute that they're giving you is still considered Florida friendly, you have to adopt that practice. They can't prohibit a Florida friendly landscaping practice.
Okay,
like one of the easiest examples I can think of is, say you want to do pine straw, and your HOA says no. Pine straw we consider Florida friendly, but your HOA says you can't do pine straw, but you need to do pine mulch. You have to do pine mulch because that's Florida friendly. But if you want to do pine straw or pine bark, and then your HOA says no, you have to use cypress or cedar mulch, that's different because that's not Florida friendly. So that's the easiest example I can give. It's tough, but so yeah, you're welcome. But anyways, so this inventory is really looking at what's happening on the property. Can it have an impact on my design? Really, the moisture, the sunshade condition, those environmental conditions that dictate where your plants are going to go is very important. I really think about views. I think about that a lot. I think about what am I looking at outside of my property. That comes from like a lot of our Japanese style gardens, like the Zen gardens. They call those borrowed views. And what it is we're using what's happening beyond our property line as a potential asset to the garden or the landscape. So what you have the ability to do is you can use plants to frame a good view, or you can use plants to block a bad view. You know, other things is like sound. You can use plants to help create sound barriers. So if you live along a major road, you can do a planting that helps protect or reduce significantly that sound. So that inventory, again, you're just walking around and taking a good inventory of what exists in your property. Some of it not going to really have a big impact, where some of it it's going to have a big impact, or some things you're not really going to consider important, and you might not think about in the future. But just this is a great way to start having a bigger, better picture in understanding of your landscape. And that analysis is that big, like, so what portion. That's that strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats from your inventory. So really thinking about what's important and what does it mean and how's it going to translate into your design. So, you know, this can be like, okay, I need to, like I mentioned, I need to block this view, open this view, maybe put some more trees in this location to increase shade, or this area I'm going to have to select plants that do better in shadier conditions. And you can see, like on this just quick analysis, you know, there's some points it's like, oh, like written in the middle of the house is at a focal point. So the focal point is maybe we need something to look at that helps draw people into the landscape. So what are some ways that you can kind of, in thinking about that big picture of and those goals and objectives of your garden, thinking about how can that play a role in this analysis as well? But you can see some of the things is like, okay, keep a view from the street, make sure it stays open. They also have a note saying keep a small sod area. So they're thinking about how that's going to be used. They want to keep open views, so they're keeping low plants and maybe framing the good views. So I always like to actually write down those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So the strengths and weaknesses, those are things that you have direct control over. Opportunities and threats are the things that you do not have control over. And a great example of like a threat would be like utilities. So you have to have utilities for your property. You have no control over where they're placed. So that falls underneath that threat. That threat. Weakness is I don't like this plant hedge screen that's here. Those plants are too big. So that becomes an opportunity. It's like that weakness is just unruly plants. You can always end up removing those. So those are in your control. So strengths and weaknesses are in our control. Opportunities and threats are outside of our control. But I always like to think that, you know, it's really cool when we're making a design, we can really lean into the strengths and opportunities as part of our design and really trying to think about how we can pull them out or put emphasis on them. But I think a true design, a very good design, is when you take those weaknesses and threats and you turn them into strengths and opportunities, which can be difficult, but it just allows us to really think what is doing well on our property, what is not, how can I plan in my design to overcome these weaknesses and threats. So, and really emphasize the strengths and the opportunities. Any questions about this analysis part? It's very free flowing. It really is when you're doing this inventory and analysis.
So at this point, we're not thinking about budget?
No, because there's nothing I mean, yes, you can think about budget as part of an inventory, because when you start to go to that design phase, when you're starting to drawing bubbles and kind of getting your ideas out, that's when you're really going to start to have to think about budget. You know, usually like on an inventory analysis, I will say, okay, there is a low budget. So that could end up being like a threat per se, that would fall within that threat. But that just means that when I'm going to do the design, I just have to be conscientious of budget. But a lot of this analysis, at least in this example, doesn't really bring in the budget into play, just because you're assessing the existing conditions.
Okay.
That's a very good question. Very, very good question. So what I want to do, so what I want us to do is I'm going to open up the example that I have of just like the base map. And I want to show you some of the tools that I use when I'm doing my inventory analysis, or I'm doing all my drawing. And I want to give you all an opportunity to kind of think about that inventory and analysis about your property. So then we can kind of do a working session on the second half of the program. So then we can talk about what you're thinking of, or help you ask questions as you're putting in the context of your design. So let me go ahead and get this open. One moment. Okay, I gotta switch what I'm sharing. So this is just the plan that I sent you all. I gotta rotate counterclockwise. Okay, so this is a very generic plan that I provided you all that you can use if you'd like, but you can obviously I encourage you to try to use your own if you have the ability. But I just want to point out a few things that are important, at least on this design, that I would think about as part of an inventory analysis that I put on here. So obviously the first thing is property line. Where is your property line? And that's what this box is that you see. And typical to a lot of homes, you then have the right of way. The right of way is technically not, it's not part of your property, but it's you still manage it pretty much. And at least on this home, it's this space right here. This is the actual road. But then it's this actual space. So you can design within your right of way, and like some HOAs, you're expected to do so as part of the landscape requirements. But the right of way is like where all the utilities are going to be. So if someone needs to come into utility maintenance, technically they have the right to come in and just kind of rip it up and do what they need to do. So I always designate where that right of way begins. So you can see this is the property line as well as the beginning of the right of way. I do have a fence line where a fence isn't on property. This is like an outdoor shed, just a storage shed. And these like little lines that you see here, those are overhead utilities. So those are like electric or like phone cable, etc. And these straight lines, that's water and wastewater. So you obviously don't want to put any trees over those. So if you don't know exactly where your utilities are, that's why it's always important to call 811 before you dig and get those utilities marked. It's a free service for homeowners, so you can learn where those utilities are if you don't know where they're at already. Because there's a lot of restrictions based off of what are those underground utilities, and you can't put like trees within certain buffers distance of them. So back here, this is a large rock, and I will be honest, this is my property because this was easy for me to make up real quickly because I had the survey. So this is my home. But this is a large limestone boulder that's not going anywhere. So it's like, okay, thanks for the giant rock. What do I do with it now? So I'm going to incorporate it as part of my design. Here's a tree back here, and this is a tree trunk. So when I look at this, you know, I'm going to start taking note of, you know, what's existing plant material. And if you are using this property boundaries, give yourself freedom to kind of think of that, do your own, like make up your own inventory and analysis of, you know, assume there's shade in some area, or there might be some other trees in that landscape to kind of make you think outside the box a little bit. So obviously in the center here, this is the building, the house, and on the exterior part of the wall, I already have windows and doors marked. This little pattern, that's all poured concrete. So, but when I look at this is the plan that I gave you all, like I mentioned, but this is kind of just that rough framework. It's like, okay, I can just start taking notes on it and do my inventory and analysis. And the same thing with your boundaries, or sorry, with your survey that you're using. And I think I have to turn off my background in order to do this part. Excuse my mess of an office. But I use this right here, just tracing paper. I put it in an email. If you all need some, let me know. I can have some available. Like if you live here in town, you can pick some up. But this is really easy to find, tracing paper. I overlay the tracing paper. It's obviously you can overlay it on your survey, and it allows you to draw very freely and not worry about damaging the actual survey or base map that you are wanting to use. So trace paper is great. In the designer world, we call it TP because it's literally just trash paper. That's all it is. You're using it to kind of create your ideas very quickly, but trace paper, this is a great tool to use whenever you're doing designs, because it gives you freedom to feel like if you screw up, you can just take you can just take it and just kind of toss it to the side, or put it in your hold until later pile in case you want to review it. And then that's really like the biggest item I would recommend, that if you're, as part of going through design, you can do that. I have specialized pens and markers, not needed. You can just use a regular old pencil. I like to use this as well. You don't need to use this yet. This is just a bunch of circles at different diameters. And when I do plant selection, to get like very precise plant counts, I pick, when I'm doing the drawing to scale, I pick the circle based off of the plant I'm using, so I can determine how many of the plant I need to purchase, essentially. So we're not going to worry about this until the very end. And then I also use, and I have this set up where it's not necessary, but I also have this right here. This is just a scale. This plan that I sent you all out, it's at 10 scale, which means that every inch is 10 feet. And it just allows you, like, you're thinking spatially of, as you're drawing things, how big things can get. You can just use a ruler, and if you know that 1 inch is 10 feet, you can kind of roughly estimate. Again, you're not necessarily going to need this until later, but this is just another tool that I commonly use. So between the trace paper, my circle template, and my scale, these are my most important tools, but the trace paper is you got to have pretty much. So what I want us to do now is, let's go ahead, and if you have your survey ready, I want you all to take some time, and let's take like 10-15 minutes break, where, get up, move around a little bit, look at your survey, take some notes, and start thinking about that inventory and analysis, because you're obviously going to have to go outside and walk around your landscape eventually. But let's just take quick note of what we have now. So take about 10-15 minutes doing that, okay? And then we'll come back. Hi, Jessica. Welcome.
Hey, sorry I'm late.
Oh, no
Um,
worries. I'll give you an update what we're doing because you'd signed in and we're just silent.
I figured you were taking like a little breather here.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. And so I recorded everything so far, so you can always catch up. But we
Okay.
talked about like what the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program is, and we talked about just like the basics of like what is a Florida, like what is the design you want to create, and like really painting that big picture of how do you, if you're designing your landscape, what's the big idea, you know, how does that landscape supposed to function, what do you want that end goal to be. And now we went to talk about the inventory and analysis, and we're kind of taking a break and they're working on the inventory analysis, kind of what is what exists in the landscape that you're trying to plan, and then what does it mean and how can it impact, so like existing trees, utility lines, fences, where's your property line, and really looking at, okay, so that's inventory, and then what does it mean is the analysis. So there might be a view that's really cool and you want to frame that view, or maybe you want to block that view. So that's what they're working on right now. We just took a break and we're going to work for about 10-15 minutes on that inventory analysis, and we're going to kind of come back and just talk a little bit about it, or help allow for some questions.
Okay.
So and let me see, there's some things that were in the chat box that you missed, and I'm putting them in right now. So
Cool.
that one is like a plant selection app that we have through the university, and that'll allow with plant selection, and then also a survey, which is like a Qualtrics survey that for the beginning of the workshop series, and then on the at the end of the workshop series I'll have you do. So so that's what we're at right now in a nutshell. But I'll send all the resources out to everybody, and you have the PowerPoint and all of that stuff available to you. So
Cool. Thanks.
yeah.
Yeah, this is during my work hours. I'm just in the office right now, so I hope I can make it.
Yeah, I saw that you had an Alachua County email. So what department are you in?
I'm in growth management, and I do landscaping inspections.
Oh, great.
So I just want to get in the mindset of how some of these things work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I help people with mitigation, which we use native trees typically, but I know with the Florida friendly, it's not always native. It's,
Yeah. The right plant, right place. Yeah.
Exactly.
Which can definitely be native. And the reason it becomes more of that right plant, right place versus native is in some of our disturbed landscapes that we're seeing within those new like planned unit developments as PUDs. Not all native plants will be successful on just sterile archer-fill or the typical archer-fill.
Yeah, exactly.
So to meet like diversity requirements, to have a diverse landscape, you know, it really pushes the right plant, right place, because there's a lot of plants that will thrive in those conditions that are non-native and are not in, the non-invasive is the big one.
Yeah,
So
more invasive stuff
yeah.
happens.
Taylor,
Yes, ma'am.
I tried to download the app and it says it's not available in my region. So I went to the mobile app page and it lets me, for instance, it let me download a couple of others, but I assume Gardening Solutions is the one you're saying you're recommending. That's what it sounds like.
Yes, because that's the one from the Florida Friendly
Right.
Landscaping
So on
Program.
the Florida Friendly page, I can download the I've got one where you identify problem plants or pests, but Gardening Solutions will not download for me.
Yeah.
For me, it's not available in our region.
But you're here in Gainesville.
Yeah, I'm sitting here in Gainesville. Yes.
Well, that makes no sense because you should be able to get it. Here, try this link.
Well, I mean, I'm on the IFAS mobile. It's the US
Oh,
IFAS mobile app downloads page. You know, that's
it's saying
it's
not
got the
available.
list of all of them.
Are you running a VPN by any chance?
I was doing it off I tried my phone once. I didn't. So no, I'm not, but I'm working on my personal Mac here from my PC, but then I tried it off my iPhone itself thinking maybe it really wanted it to come off the phone.
And it's here, let me see.
Now, are you on an iPhone or are you on an Android?
I'm on an iPhone.
Okay, and you have it, and I had it downloaded once when I, like a year ago, but I had so many things I wasn't using, I took it off, but.
Greg, do you have the FFL app on your phone?
Oh, you're still muted. Yeah, while you're unmuting, Greg, I have to tell you, I saw this great little thing in Reader's Digest last month about how Zoom meetings have caused us all to learn more about seances. And it has this little thing like in a seance, you say, Betty, are you there? Can you hear me? Well, that's a funny comparison.
That is hilarious, by the way.
I tried to find it a minute ago when I tried to see if I could find it online and I couldn't. It's funny that it's not available just to share, but it was in the print version. Anyway, so Greg, sorry, you were answering the question of is it on your phone and does it work?
I've had it before, but I don't seem to have it now.
Well, and I used to have it, but I know I intentionally deleted it because I was cleaning things that I wasn't using. This was months ago. It was last year, in fact. And if you try to download it now, does it tell you that app is not available for you?
I'm still looking for it.
I have I'm running the web portion of it on my phone, but I'm trying to get to the website. You're okay. Plant mobile guide. Yeah, because I have it up and running now. But I'm running it through the browser.
Ah, got you. Okay, let me try that.
And then I'm running it through the Safari, and then you can add it to your home screen.
Oh yeah, I've done that with some other things. Okay.
Yeah, so try through there, and you'll have to sign on and see if that works. Because that's how I have it running. Because it's not like a real app either. Yeah.
Probably why it was doing that.
Yeah.
So can I ask a general question? As I said, this is something I've started to so right this moment, I can't find my survey to actually do a site plan. So that's why I just gave up and sat back down. But I know different things I would like to do in different areas. I have my thoughts. But if we truly are looking at doing a landscape, and it sounds like 2 or 3 people are looking at truly doing something in their yards, are there resources, or can you recommend people or nurseries that will know what they're talking about when you describe where you're wanting to put something and what your intent is? And is this really a good place for a tea olive or no? And now you're muted.
It depends on the nursery you go to.
That's what I'm saying. And are there some you would, but are there, and I know you want to be careful and not be
Right.
sensitive to someone, but are there some that you could, without saying what to stay away from, are there some that you could say,
Yeah.
there are people there that know what they're talking about?
So usually if you're just going to just like the nurseries, the retail nurseries, that's what they specialize in. You should find people that are very knowledgeable to help you. So like based off of the neighborhood you said in, like, I mean, the Garden Gate Nursery is always really good. They're smaller, of course, but Garden Gate Nursery, if you want to travel, TNT Greenhouse Nursery are always really nice.
Those are ones that I felt like I was getting good responses from, and those are my three go-to. Actually,
Yeah.
The Greenhouse and Garden Gate are my favorite.
Yeah, and Blue Star out in Hawthorne, they usually have a pretty good selection. They're very knowledgeable. So usually if you're just going to a nursery, like I'm going to go to a plant nursery, you should be fine. So usually when you go to like some of like the big box stores, they'll have just seasonal help, and they may not have the best recommendations, or they may not have the best inventory to pick from.
That's what I find is their inventory. Right. That's I'm really looking at that inventory and how to like species like that.
Because you'll see a lot of stuff that's for sale that won't grow here. Won't grow well here.
or invasive.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you guys doing the native plant sale at all this year?
Yes, we are. May 15th.
Oh.
And you know where the old Camp McConnell is? Down in Micanopy?
No, I've heard people talk about it, but
it's now owned by the county, and it's now called Cuskawilla. We'll start advertising it more here soon, but it's going to be there.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, I mean, Greg here is one of the co-chairs for the Master Gardeners in the Plant Sale Committee.
So we may be meeting each other, I hope.
Yeah, I will. I will, if it's okay, reach back out.
And I will shamelessly promote us. We have really good plant selection.
Oh, yeah. Oh my
God.
I started sharing it with others at work, and last year they I ended up picking up for people. So it's a
Yes, Lance.
Does IFAS have a program where somebody can come out and kind of look at the health of the plants that are already here?
Yes. So being that you're in Alachua County, you can reach out, no matter what county you're in, reach out to your county extension office, and we can help do assessments. The one thing that we will not do is risk assessment for trees. We will leave that up to arborists that have that special certification and license.
Okay. Yeah. I've got some stuff on the plants that doesn't look right to me, and I'm just kind of curious if it's normal, if it's not normal. Is it a disease? Is it a pest? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can reach out actually directly to me. We also have the Master Gardener Volunteer Help Desk. I'll put their email in the chat box. You can email your questions, and you can send pictures, say what you're seeing and all that stuff. And in some like certain dire situations, we can do site visits.
Okay. So there's a lot of palms on the property, and I've been kind of hearing some stuff about some palm diseases that are getting kind of prevalent in the area, and I'm just kind of worried about them.
Yeah, understandable. That's lethal bronzing. That's with a lot of our palm species now, and more than likely, if you're having a lot pop up, they're going to be the sable palmetto or the cabbage palm, and they are susceptible to lethal bronzing. But if the palmetto gets lethal bronzing, you're going to see it decline within a matter of days. Okay. So it's very prevalent. But yeah, you can reach out, email to that mag@alachuacounty.us, or you can reach out to me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's with every county. Every county has that as part of IFAS. Just reach out to your county extension office because they're going to have the most reliable information, especially if you have questions about codes and compliance and tree management. Of course, we have Jessica on here. So Jessica is, she's one of our participants, and she is part of growth management, landscape inspections, right? That's what you said?
Yeah, I'm the county forester / landscape inspector.
Yeah. So Alachua County is awesome because we do have foresters and the such that can super beneficial. Super nice to have.
I do the tree permitting. So
Oh, you do?
yeah, around Alachua County. If you have like tree removal permitting questions, I can answer that for you.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I get questions all the time about heritage oaks, and I'm like, call growth management.
Yeah.
So sorry if I send people to you, Willie.
No, I'd rather people ask than cut them down.
Yeah, because I say that, because the growth, like at least heritage trees can be dictated by ULDC documents.
Yeah.
And I know that as part of our new ULDC, those have changed, I believe,
yeah,
for a lot of the tree species.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So, yes, Lance.
May I ask another question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm assuming the city in Gainesville or in Alachua County are pretty much the same with their ordinances on trees, or is there a big difference?
Jessica, I'll hand that to you.
They're similar, but they're not the same.
Okay. Because I grew up here, and I remember hearing a long time ago, like anything under 4 inches in diameter, you could cut down. I mean, I don't know. I was just.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know for the city of Gainesville, but for Alachua County, anything 8 inches in diameter is regulated. But there's a whole list called specimen trees. So, for example, there's like hop hornbeam.
Yes.
And those are regulated at 5 inches. And that kind of gets kind of like hairy, but for the most part, the general regulated tree starts at 8 inches.
Is that something I can find on the web?
So the code recently got updated, and we have tried to update it with the Muni code, but it is not completely updated yet, and I'm not sure when that will be.
Okay.
But I can always email you if you're interested, if you want to put that in the chat. I can email you the code. But it's for
I'll just put an email in there.
If you're in the city, it's different. They have their own code.
Yeah.
I just put the Muni code link for Alachua County on there.
I don't think I'm in the city.
No, you're not. You're Alachua County.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Alachua County.
Yeah. So, all right. So, let's go ahead and let's talk about, so have you all had an opportunity to look at your inventory analysis a little bit? What are some things that popped up that you noticed? And you'll still obviously have, I want you to spend this next week, try to stake some time and try to finish that inventory analysis so we can be prepared for next week's program. But what is something that you've noticed that you started thinking about?
I live in a jungle with a water feature.
Yeah, there you go. So because you're in HPA, yes, you're highly wooded. You're very forested in that area. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a lot of pine trees. In my yard, had a lot of pine trees, and then a lot of the laurel or water oaks, which honestly, I don't really care for them. And then we have some sweet gum, and I actually have some bamboo, and then tons of palms, and either ligustrum or verbena. I don't know which one it is. And then a bunch of sago palms, and then other types of palm things that look like, I don't know what they are.
So yeah, urban canopy cover is very important, and water and laurel oaks are kind of a dime a dozen to a certain extent.
And short-lived.
And very short-lived, because I was saying it's like around 30 years or so, they both get very weak wooded, and I get uncomfortable having them close to a home. But anyways, or they're more susceptible to breakage. It's not like their wood gets weaker all of a sudden, but so yeah, so you're going to have a lot of shade because like that's very predominant characteristic of HPA. Yet you have to have like a certain ground cover buffer right along the roadway. Like you have to have turf grass. Is that correct?
I don't think we have to have turf grass. From what I remember, we just had, if there's a hedge there, you have to replace it with the same thing. Like if you bought the house with the way it is, you kind of have to replace it with the same thing.
Which is very unfortunate because some of those landscape codes haven't been updated in over almost 40 years.
Yeah.
So like I shared with Hale Plantation West and HPNA, which is a subgroup of Hale Plantation, what their landscapes would look like if they let the plants go to mature size. So it literally becomes a jungle. But anyways, so great. So yeah, you have a lot of shade. It's going to have impact, and where those are located on the property is important as well. What are some other things that you all noticed?
Well, in my yard, Wendy Wilbur, the landscape state land master gardener coordinator, once said that master gardeners are a support group for plantaholics. And just looking around my yard, I mean, I have a lot of different plants, many varieties. And, you know, I sort of acquired them and planted them without a real overriding plan, which I kind of wish I hadn't, but I wasn't, you know, I wasn't that knowledgeable then. So that's what I'm looking at in my yard.
Trying to create, I don't want to call it chaos, but try to find more order within it.
Yeah, and it's something that looks more unified and put together. I mean, to me, it's beautiful because, you know, I love all of my different plants and, you know, I know the history and everything, but to somebody coming in the yard, I don't know how cohesive they would look.
You have a botanical garden.
I do.
That's what you have.
A mini botanical garden.
A mini botanical garden. Yeah.
I can so relate to Greg because that's how I am. I fall in love with everything. I have to have one of each, and it's like organized chaos.
Yep. We're gonna make what we can do is we can make order out of that. Make that chaos more organized. How's that?
Good.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Jacqueline or Anna, Judy, Mary, do you all have any thoughts or anything?
I noticed that I think very short-sighted and I crowd my plants and forget they're going to get bigger. So yeah,
That's
I got a lot
common.
of clusters.
Yeah. So
I think my situation may be very different. I really like to look Hale, so I filled my front yard with plants. And then everybody in the neighborhood got a dog. And I went to the beach and I came back and I had 15 dog piles in my yard. So when everybody would hide behind one of the bushes, then I'd go cut it down and trim it back. And so I've just got to regroup because I can't have one afternoon, but in 2 hours between 12 and 2, I had 10 different groups of people coming down the street with dogs, and some of them had 2 and 3 dogs. So I've got to have a plain front yard. I can't deal with this.
This isn't a per se an IFAS recommendation, but in vegetable gardens, a common practice is you put up motion censored sprinklers to deter deer. I don't know how good that would be to keep people with their dogs walking out. That's very unfortunate. I mean, I know someone in our office has a similar issue with people walking their dogs and not picking up after the dogs. They actually started just putting up the bags and like a little sign, or like they had a little sign that said pretty much don't let your dog poop here. And that was effective. Not 100%, but it helped reduce it.
I think they just love it now when their dog poops in my yard because they know it irritates the fool out of me. So I yell at them. I walk outside. I've done, and they said put coffee all over. I tried that. That did nothing. And what I've had to do is if I have a pile, I put lime on it, and that seems to to detract the other dogs from, after I clean it up from coming in the yard. But I just have been watching like crazy to try to get them out, but I can't have all my plants there because they hide behind them.
Yeah, so that's a really good thing that you can point out in your inventory as a threat. Is there are people that are bringing their dogs, or that dogs are able to go poop in your yard, and how can you create a design to help minimize or avoid that? I wouldn't recommend doing the lime because that increases the pH of the soil. So that can make it difficult for other plants to grow in the future.
What I've tried to do is just right where they poop is where I put the lime. So I'm not putting
Yeah.
it all over.
All over,
Because
yeah.
that's the only thing. I've tried coffee and they said citrus and I tried that. And I've tried all this, everything I saw on the internet, I've tried, and it doesn't keep them out of my yard at all. But if I put the lime right where they go when I clean it up, that seems to keep them from drawing them back into that. But people are, they're horrible.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Mary.
You just have something to say.
Oh, I would, Mary, we'll work more during your design, because I can help work with you in trying to try to reduce that risk of getting animals. So that'll be something that, like, here's a goal. Here's one of the goals or objectives of your design is how can you create a landscape that can minimize people from having this happen. So Judy.
Tiger traps. Put furring strips out there with little nails pointed up.
Oh,
Dogs don't like
gosh.
to walk on that.
So I don't know if I recommend that, but it's like Home Alone.
Totally off the record, yes.
Annie or Judy, did you have anything pop up that you thought about for your landscape that is part of that inventory analysis that you consider?
Well, I think for the plot that I'm working on, which is a home in Raintree, the first thing we're going to do is take out a lot of the things that are overgrown and not really serving any purpose, even though they could, theoretically be worked into something sculptural at some point. But some podocarpus planted between the house and the sidewalk, and there's hardly any sidewalk left, and you can't prune them back anymore. They just look horrible.
Yeah.
So that's a for instance. They're gone.
And I think that's a good part of inventory analysis. You're looking at that existing plant material and you're starting to say, okay, what can stay, what should go? Because it's okay to remove plants as part of that design. So that's very good. All right. Anna, did you have anything? And you're muted right now, so you'll have to unmute yourself. Is it hiding on you? Yeah, it still shows that you're muted. I wish I had sometimes the ability to control muting and unmuting from my end to a certain extent. So Anna, while you figure out that, our goal for today was to get to that inventory and analysis portion of the program. And I want you all to spend this week trying to finalize that inventory and analysis, because what I want us to do at the beginning of next week's session is for all of us to share the inventory and analysis that you've done and the things that you've learned about your landscape. So that's going to be our big goal for next week. And I'll have some stuff too. Like I'm working on this thing right here. I started putting on that base method I gave you all, like this orange box. That's a screen of podocarpus. So it's just a big 20-foot shrub hedge. We have 3 big trees that align the property, and this back property is all wooded, undeveloped. So it could be a nice view that I can hold on to. So, and then this little blue line, that's water comes off of the home and it flows this direction, and it flows down through into a storm what do I want to say, swale that's on this side of the property. So so go ahead and like, I'm going to finish mine as well. I'm going to be working on mine this with you all, but we'll share next week and we'll learn more before we jump into that next step. I was like, okay, let's start to design, let's start drawing and coming up with ideas and really hitting the road with some sketching. So next week, we're going to spend a lot of time just having fun drawing pictures after we get to that main designer's toolbox section. All righty. Oh, and Anna, you're unmuted. Yay.
Yes, my mute thing came up. The thing that I found the most when I did the tour was that as I've aged, I no longer do the maintenance on all of the hedging that's there. So it's one of the things that I want to think about. If we go to replace that, what I would put there. We have a back fenced in area and hedging all in the front. And it's a lot to have to maintain. So I want something simple that doesn't work too fast.
Yeah. So maintenance, thinking about maintenance as part of the inventory analysis of like, what do you want to do? What can you do? And you may be able to take care of a yard today, but in a couple of years, if you don't want to do as heavy maintenance, you know, really thinking about how do those plants change over time, and really thinking about that mature size of plants will be very, very beneficial, because then you'll let those plants just grow, and any pruning that you have to do is just for health and nothing else. So really reduce your effort. So, and I like to call myself a lazy gardener, because I want to have a nice landscape where I don't have to do much. So my goal is to create those landscapes that allow me to be a lazy gardener, because I'd rather be outside enjoying it. And I do like gardening, but I prefer being outside playing with the kids, you know, looking for bugs and all of that stuff. Yes. Yeah. Jacqueline put in that she uses the iNaturalist app. That's a wonderful app that you can use for plant ID. So, but we're creeping up on 4 o'clock. We have completed our first 2-hour session. You all are now 2 hours further along in your knowledge of landscape design and planning. Woo! So I really encourage you to work on that inventory and analysis week. Send me an email if you have questions. Give me a call if you want feedback. You know, use me as a resource as you go throughout this. Don't just use me as a once a week, I hear Taylor talk about random stuff and then I work on it. Use me as a springboard for ideas. And because I want you all at the end of this whole workshop series is to have a design that you all feel comfortable and confident in. They're like, you know, I can do this and I like it. That's cool. So any other questions anybody has before we call it a day? And we might get out here literally a minute early.
I have one quick one. Is there a way, or we could address this next meeting, but I'd like for us to share. I see Lance put in his email, but can we share so we can communicate with each other as well?
Everybody send me an email if you're okay with that. Because like I've been just blind copying everybody on those emails because I just want to make sure that I get permissions from everybody. Now, Lance, are you okay with sharing your email with people?
That's why I put it in there. And it was,
Maybe, no, I won't be able to do that. Never mind. So yeah, let me know if you're comfortable. I'll send out an email. Let me know if you're comfortable with me sharing your email. So then if you all want to email and share ideas, cool. Because what we're going to do as part of that helping share is we're going to do breakout groups next week. So rather than this all being in one room, I might break us out in 2 smaller rooms to allow a little bit for better discussion amongst one another. So it could just be an opportunity to share some more. So so Jan shared hers. Yeah, thank you, Jan. And we have Lance's. So I'll send that email out, and then once I get everyone's confirmation, I'll just then send out like a document that has everyone's emails listed on it. All righty. Cool.
Taylor, was that the app that you used for the boundary that you drew? Was that just a like a basic CAD program, or was that something specific?
Yeah, I just use my CAD program. There's free
Okay.
versions of drafting stuff like CAD, but yeah, this is just my educator's copy of CAD that I use.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. There's some like oh, I can't remember. I'm having a brain fart. I used to know of a free one. I don't expect you all to draw this. I mean, you can literally just sketch out your plan on a large piece of paper, your property to the best of your knowledge, and you can, that's suitable for this. You know, having the plan to scale is just, it comes down to allowing you to have the most accurate plant count at the end of the day. But if you're interested in trying to say, hey, I don't have a survey, but I'd like to get one, maybe I could help try to make one for you. It does take me a bit to do, so I'm not sure if I'll have enough time to, but let me know if there's something I can do to help you in this process.
If I email you a PDF of my boundary survey, can you just make it larger for me and kind of with the same proportions? Is that possible? Or
Yeah,
no?
absolutely. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
Perfect.
That'd
I'll
be
clean
easy.
it up a little bit to make it easier to deal with.
Yeah. Like I have this, this plan is an 18-inch by 24-inch. And you can easily get that printed out at like any of those print stores. And it's not for black and white. It's not too expensive. So,
Yeah, I could just on an 8.5 and 11, just the one that I have, the picture of the house is so small, I can't really work with it at all.
yeah. If you want to send it to me, I'll try to scale it up for you.
Yeah, if you can't, just tell me you can. That's fine. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, all right. Well, y'all are awesome. I'm excited about working with y'all over the next couple of weeks. So, you know, always send me emails, reach out to me, and I can't wait to see what we come up with or see what y'all come up with. So
Thanks. This is really exciting and a great start.
yeah. All righty. Well, you all,
Very motivating.
Good. Well, you all have a wonderful week. I got a giant bag of vermiculite I got to get rid of. So, so you all take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.